I want to talk about two positive developments in machine learning, and I've been around this business long enough, that's where all the gray hair is from, that I've seen lots and lots of AI winters. And I actually believe that this one is not going to turn into an AI winter, that something fundamentally has changed. And I want to start with fast conceptual learning and decision making. And one of the things that we've struggled with over the years with artificial intelligence, with machine learning, is how do you get all of those concepts organized? And one of the advances that has happened, and there's a lot of how IBM does things that I disagree with, but what they're doing with Watson is starting to demonstrate that you can actually get deep conceptual learning. And I'm talking about the program that they're using now that actually reads medical journals, incorporates ideas from those journals about cancer diagnostics. And they have trialed this in a couple of places, and they've shown that in fact, very often replicates the decision that the actual oncologist would have made anyway. But in a few cases, because it doesn't have to sleep, it doesn't have to eat, it doesn't have to go out and have fun, it can just sit there and read papers constantly. And so there have been a couple of instances where that program recommended a new treatment that if the oncologist had read that paper already, that they would have recommended. And so what we're seeing is they have built up the ability to understand at least academic language. A lot of us can't understand academic language, but they've learned how to read these academic papers, ingest that information into their model. And that's something that is fundamentally different than what we've been able to do before. And so this brings real possibilities for improving diagnostics and in making those diagnostics available even in places that perhaps is not the premier cancer institute in the world. So this is a good thing. I like good things. The next, automating the easy decisions. Now this is in contrast to what we're talking about with Watson, because Watson, with this cancer diagnostic, it takes a lot of work to get it to that level. But there are many things you can do that can actually automate the easy decisions. And so that you can focus the human brain power on the tough cases. If you can take the 60% or the 50% or even the 80% of the low-hanging fruit out of that equation, we can focus our problem-solving abilities on the things that actually require that level. They've done this in years before. They started actually with pap smears. And they would automate the scanning of pap smears. And they would knock out about 60% of them as being obviously clear. And that number keeps going up, and it allows the pathologists who are looking at these images to focus on the things that are different. And you can, over time, improve where that bar happens. Again, this helps with accessibility. We can now give the volunteer medical assistants who are going out to the villages in the various countries in Africa, we can equip them with a smartphone that can help them help people right there. So fewer people have to go into the hospital. Now, there's kind of a downside to this one. The more of the low-hanging fruit that goes away, the fewer people you need to do this. And this is part of the discussion that I think needs to happen around many of the things that are happening, not just with automation, but also with machine learning, is what does that mean for our economy? What does it mean for the jobs that are going to be lost? And that's a dialogue that is only now starting to happen in any kind of meaningful way. So, now, and I think one of the first ones is, in many of these cases, the power is coming from systems that we can't understand. For those of you who have maybe looked at the history of AI, we used to have these wonderful decision trees and all of these inference rules, and you could write the inference rules in English. And you could see, oh, okay, well, if I see this and this and this, I'm going to categorize as such. It's very difficult to extract the rationale from a neural network. It's very hard to know what it is that it's looking at. One of the more amusing ones that I've heard about, they had this wonderful algorithm for representing wolves. I have a passion for wolves. And then they realized, actually, they had a wonderful algorithm to recognize snow, because all of the wolf pictures that they used, it was in the wintertime. And so they showed a wolf in a nice green forest, and it didn't recognize it. And for a long time, they thought they had this wonderful algorithm because they didn't know what it was recognizing. A more serious case, there was a hospital that was looking to automate the decision-making around when a patient who had a particular kind of surgery would be put into the ICU or not. And they were smart about this. They ran 2 different learning algorithms. One that came up with a neural network that they couldn't understand, but it was actually quite accurate. And the second, which wasn't nearly as good. It was pretty good, but not nearly as good as the neural network, but it resulted in something that they could actually look at. They were learning things more that looked like rules so they could check it out. And they realized a flaw. Part of their protocol were for asthma patients to automatically go into the ICU. And so the data did not say anything about asthma patients. And yet if they would have put this protocol into effect, their strategy was to send all patients through this algorithm. And those asthma patients that would have gone into the ICU automatically possibly would not have gone in and probably would have died. And they wouldn't have known that. And this is part of the problem. We do not understand the quality of the data that we are using, which leads me to my next problem, which is biased data sets. We do not have unbiased data sets now. And we have an economy and approaches that say more and more and more data. But what does this data reflect? It reflects our current reality. It reflects the biases, the structural biases that exist within our culture. And yes, we can study the data and try to see, are certain groups overrepresented or underrepresented? Are there other structural or social characteristics that might impact this data? But the fact is, we don't know how to get unbiased data. We don't necessarily know how to get to the point where we can use a program like is being used in some places where the prosecutor can run an algorithm to say whether or not you are likely to re-offend. And many studies have shown these things to be racially biased. The other problem is that because of proprietary technology, the defense has no way to challenge that finding. They have no way of knowing what bias went into that algorithm. With the previous slide, they have no way of understanding why it is this person is categorized as a threat and this person is not. Now, I am not a tech, I'm not a tech utopian. I'm not into tech as an evil either. Tech is neutral. It is how we in society are using this technology that is going to make the difference. And we have to think about all of these different possible outcomes. There's some wonderful things that are coming out of machine learning, but we have to be cognizant of the risks. We don't know how these work. We don't know what biases are being introduced. How do you test something when you don't even know that the answer is there? How do we know the code is right? With this hypothesis, if it comes out false, is it because the hypothesis is actually false? Or is it because the code is wrong? We're not perfect. We don't all write perfect code. How do we know? So we need to look at these things both with the possibilities in mind as well as with the potentials for how things can go wrong. And we need to start to advocate for a better understanding of where some of our structural biases in our culture are infesting our systems. Thank you very much.